Hello, and welcome to another episode of Break the Cycle with me, your host, Joshua Smith. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Monday. I know Monday sucks, but at least you get to start it off with Break the Cycle. 5 days a week, you know how we roll. We're always here, unless, somebody bails on me. Someday it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen, but we got a great show for you tonight. Let's start off with some sponsors. Of course, we have TopLobster.com, the man, the myth, the legend, my good friend and partner on Break the Cycle, where you can get this great Reed Mises Not Mark shirt that I'm wearing tonight at a 10% discount by using BTC at checkout, or you can join the Patreon Subscribe Star or become a member of the YouTube channel to get into a private Discord server where you can get up to 30% off of new designs like almost 2 weeks prior to them going to the general public. Good stuff, worth every penny. And of course, we have anthemplanning.com for all your emergency and crisis planning needs. Check them out today. See what they can do for your business, home, or personal life. They're wonderful people doing an amazing job that the government has historically sucked at, much cheaper and for much cheaper and much more efficiently. Guys, we've got a great show for you tonight. Like I said, I'm stoked to have this one. Not only because he's a great political commentator and an awesome voice, but also because he's a wrestling fan. And I grew up on the wrestling spectrum, as I like to call it. But he is a former American radio host, I believe, political commentator and wrestling connoisseur. He is Mr. Jack Hunter. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Hi there. Good to be with you. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Me too. So, you're really into politics. You're really into wrestling. You were talking a little bit about wrestling prior to starting the show. What's the new wrestling promotion that you watch?
All Elite Wrestling. It is owned by the Khan family. Shad Khan owns the Jacksonville Jaguars and has more money than Vince McMahon. Well, his son makes me look like a casual fan. And now he has his own wrestling company. Comes on Wednesday nights and now Friday nights on TNT. And it is super exciting. And I love it.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, let's talk politics first. Okay, so you've been doing this political commentator thing for a long time. You were on the radio in the 90s. I don't know how long that ran for, but it was South Carolina. You've worked on Ron Paul's campaign. You worked with Rand Paul. How did you become? I know you call yourself. You're more like a conservative, American conservative, but you kind of lean libertarian, liberty based, right?
Sure, I'm a libertarian, conservative libertarian. I'm both of those things. I got involved, some of the young kids students and whatnot will ask me, like for career advice. I'm like, well, I have the weirdest career trajectory ever that nobody should attempt, but it happened. And, I'm glad it did. I worked in rock radio in the 90s in South Carolina. One of my closest friends was like their top afternoon DJ when that was a thing. Like, we're talking like 97, 98 or whatever. And I was a local musician. That's how most people knew me. And, I was interested in politics and whatnot, but it's not what I did. But anyways, we were at a bar one night watching Monday Night Raw, to be honest with you. And he's like, you should come on my radio show and do political commentary. And you'll be like this anonymous wrestler guy. I'm small. I can't wrestle, but, that kind of character. And I did. And in between, Weezer and Stone Temple Pilots, you would hear this guy ranting and raving about politics. And that was me. And it was popular. I did that for many years on the station. I made that into a career in talk radio later, and I wasn't anonymous there. And when I was doing that was around the time, 2007, 2008, that Ron Paul was running for president. And I was already putting my commentaries on YouTube, which had only been around a couple years at that time, started in 2005. And among conservative commentators, even though I was a local guy in a smaller secondary market here in Charleston, South Carolina, there weren't many people getting behind Ron Paul. Or even acknowledging that he was a conservative, that there could be such thing as an anti-war conservative. You got to remember this is the tail end of the Bush-Cheney era, in which being a conservative almost solely meant being for the Iraq War, being for torture, being for the Patriot Act, all that kind of stuff. So it was me, Judge Napolitano, who's way bigger than I am, obviously, and Charles Goyette, who was a radio host out in, I believe, Arizona, who later got fired for his anti-war views, were really the only people on the right saying, yeah, all those other guys suck. Ron Paul's the real Republican. He's the real conservative. That's who we need. And so that immediately sort of put me on the campaign's radar because I was one of the only people with a fairly large YouTube channel. I think I had 250,000 at the time before it was taken down, as YouTube is wont to do. But that's how I got on their radar. I did not work for the 2008 campaign, though it felt like it. I introduced Ron, Dr. Paul, in a number of different places, wrote about him all the time. Almost all my YouTubes were about how great he was and how everybody else was terrible. And then I did officially work for the 2012 campaign. I was with Senator Rand Paul, co-authored his book, The Tea Party Goes to Washington. So all things Paul and right-leaning libertarianism within the Republican Party, that's what I was doing, if that gives you an idea of how I got there.
Sure, absolutely, man. It's what a beautiful ride it was watching Ron Paul, man. I try to talk to people about it. You know, we have this Mises caucus, right? That's in the Libertarian Party now that is trying to revive the Ron Paul revolution. We've been endorsed. All of us really has been endorsed by Ron Paul, but I got that personal endorsement last year for my run for chair of the National Convention Committee. It felt really good, man, because I remember 2008 and then 2012 as well, but I remember 2008 and how coalesced we were around the Ron Paul revolution. I mean, it wasn't, there's a lot of infighting in the liberty movement between, Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, whatever other kind of libertarians there are, because there's 100 different kinds, and it's always fighting. It wasn't like that in 2008. And I try to explain that to people. It was like this beautiful, happy movement where everyone was working together and doing really well, and then trying to fight basically the GOP establishment. But I mean, can you give us some memories of working for Ron Paul and working for Rand Paul? I mean, what are some of your favorites?
Absolutely. So I agree with everything you just said. Look, nowadays I like to say to people when we're talking about politics, I'm like, I think most of America is where Joe Rogan is, and people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, here's a guy who was a Bernie bro, but he would vote for Trump over Biden. And he has hosts, people on like Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard, but also Bernie and also Trump. And you see what I'm saying? You can't really pin him down. He's a smart guy. He's an interesting guy. I think that's where a lot of Americans are. I think the Ron Paul 2008 campaign and 2012, but especially 2008, it was people who were just regular conservative Republicans, which is, I guess, what I was at the time. People who were apathetic, who never didn't care about politics. I'm sure you remember the slogan, Ron Paul cured my apathy, was popular in 2008. Lots of young people who might have just began getting interested in politics flocked to Ron Paul. But it was a coalition of people who, some were definitely right and some were definitely more left favorable or whatever. But that microcosm to me is still the coalition that could sort of promote libertarianism. I call it libertarian populism. There are people who have different ideas of what libertarian populism can be. But Ron Paul already did it at a micro level. He got 1 million votes in the 2008 primary and 2 million in the 2012. But I think combining elements of some of the things Trump was successful with at a bigger level and tweaking some of them, that Ron, Rand Paul, some other liberty Republican, you have Massey, my friend Nancy Mace, could really lead and sort of promote or project or whatever you want to call it, that sort of broad coalition that we had in 2008. Like, look, people get older, things change, new people are born, some people pass away, but it's still sort of the feeling of what that was and these different groups coming together. I think that's part of what the Trump coalition is. I mean, look, his Hispanic vote went up 45%. So obviously those people weren't voting Republican before and now are. So, and that's just one example I could give. But I think 2008 and 2012 and the Ron Paul movement that he built could be a pathway to the future. As far as you asked for any stories, boy, I got a bunch, probably some I shouldn't tell. It occurred to me, I was writing a lengthy piece, a feature for the American Conservative. They asked me, I was in the campaign van. It was a van. We didn't have a bus for Rand when he was crisscrossing Kentucky for his original 2010 race. And the American Conservative asked me to write a feature because, Rand was new on the scene. A lot of people knew that Ron Paul had a son that was interested in getting into politics, but this was it, and it was pretty new. And I always remember, and I put this in the piece, those of us in the liberty movement or libertarians are like, do they strategize or do this or do that or, call each other up and what are you going to do? I think you should do this. And I asked him something like that, like, do you do that? And he just looked at me like I had three heads. I'm talking about Rand Paul while we were just traveling. And it occurred to me instantly that part of their libertarianism It's so personal to them, the way Ron Paul is and the way Rand Paul grew up. They don't tell each other what to do or even try to or ask. They just do their own thing, and they love and respect each other, which is, individual action. But I don't think a lot of people, certainly at that time, necessarily understood that. That certainly made an impression on me. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you talked a little bit about this libertarian populism, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many people in the libertarian movement that think populism is a bad word. I've tried to explain it on the show several times that I don't think populism is a bad thing. In fact, I think it's important that we are messaging to where people are with our libertarian ideals, and that's pretty much what populism is. You're feeding off of the things that people worry about or care about or want to see happen, and you're using those things to push your principles, right? And that's for Trump, he was kind of feeding off some fear for people, fear of immigration, fear of communism, fear of these things, and using those to message his platform. What is populism to you? I mean, just explain it for the people on my show.
Populism is this simple. It's the little guy against the big guy. Now, our libertarian friends that think populism is the problem, and I have people I'm very close to and love very much that think that, what bureaucrat walking around in the Pentagon who's not a populist by just definition of what this person is going to be like, you know what? I think Rand Paul was right about this foreign policy stuff. I'm going to help change this agency from within, and we're not going to be an empire anymore. Like, how do you get anything we want if it's not people at the grassroots putting pressure on politicians? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't even as a libertarian, if you're something else, if you think like, Joe Biden's plans are what we should be doing and whatever, but if you're a libertarian, some of the things we want to do are a radical challenge to the system. So how do you get there? How do you get there without some sort of populist grassroots upbringing? The Tea Party's greatest accomplishment was the sequester, in which Congress forced itself to cut if it couldn't come up with things to cut. Of course, it didn't come up with things to cut and had automatic cuts, and they got rid of that pretty quick. But it was pressure on Republican politicians, specifically from the Tea Party, that made them do something like that. That was sort of unprecedented. They were for small government in practice instead of just rhetoric for once. But my friends that think populism is the problem, I agree with some of the things we saw, especially during the Trump era, that I didn't like. My biggest one is how we talk about immigrants now. It was great before, but it was just taken to a whole new level. But lo and behold, as I said earlier, Trump got 45% increase in the Hispanic vote. I actually spoke with a Latino friend who was in the Mises Caucus recently. We were talking about this. Maybe I'll get to that in a little bit. He had some ideas that were similar to mine about libertarian populism. But I would also add to this that populism is not just Trump now or Trump 2 years ago. Populism is Bernie's movement, Bernie Sanders' movement. It's not principles I agree with, but it's organic. It's young people flocking to Bernie, he is the reverse of Ron Paul, like the oldest guy on the ticket, not a great orator or anything, but kids just get excited that they're principled and flock to him. I always like to point out, Jesse Jackson's 1988 campaign was considered a populist campaign. A lot of African Americans got behind that. The Howard Dean run in 2004, that was certainly populist. The Tea Party movement was populist. Populism can be left or right. It could be all sorts of things. Hell, the GameStop thing in January, in which, Robinhood wouldn't let people buy stocks anymore. That was populist. That was the small retail investor against Wall Street, right? So the definition of populism is the little guy against the big guy. And if we're libertarians, our ideas are certainly not what the establishment espouses. So we're the little guy, and we're trying to fight the big guy, which is the political establishment. So that doesn't mean you have to be exactly like Donald Trump, though. As somebody, and let me say this from the get-go, I'm definitely not never Trump. I don't like those people, especially the neoconservative ones, which make up most of the never Trumpers. But I'm not like super pro-Trumpy either. I like some things that he did, and I say that. And when he does things I don't like, I would say that too. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was one of the better breakdowns we've had of populism on the show. I've had several other people, everyone's got a little bit of a different idea. I think it's one of those words that's just gotten so muddy to so many people that people are just like, it's bad, it's all bad. And it's really not. It's actually a good thing if you're running political campaigns, certainly.
Well, it's funny, one of my favorite conservative thinkers and the man who introduced me to intellectual conservatism is Russell Kirk, who some of your viewers may or may not be familiar with. He's the reason that people in the United States who are right-leaning call themselves conservatives. his book 1953, The Conservative Mind. Before that, even Bill Buckley used to call himself an individualist. But after Kirk's book, people were like, oh, we're conservatives. They started using that word. But he was for, sort of natural aristocracy, that there will be elites and they'll rule society, and, was against populism, thought populism was bad. But near the end of his life, he was like the Michigan chairman for the Pat Buchanan, 1996 campaign. Or I guess that would have been 92. But that's about as populist as you get in politics. So my point is, even he is somebody who really wasn't warm to libertarians, but was conservative, certainly believed in the Constitution, was a Barry Goldwater guy, all that. The only way you kind of get there is doing something populist. So he actively was against populism, but you see what I'm getting at? Like, yep. How else do you do it? So. Yeah,
absolutely. You brought up a word that you and I both despise equally, neoconservatism, and we're right on the day we're pulling out of Afghanistan. Okay. And there's a lot of really upset, salty neocons around the country today. I
love it so much.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And Joe Biden came out and gave a speech today where he basically doubled down on pulling out of Afghanistan, and it was
a good speech.
It was a good speech. I couldn't believe it. And here's the thing, like as a libertarian, as somebody who despises the Joe Biden era, right? Like, I've never liked Joe Biden. I didn't like Obama. I didn't like Trump either. You know what I mean? They're all warmongers to me. I think it was great that Trump didn't start any new wars. That was a feather in his cap, whatever. But as somebody who went to war under George Bush and then watched these wars in the Middle East just continue my entire life since, I wanted to talk bad. I wanted to say something bad about Joe Biden. I really did. And he came out and doubled down.
Look, I am not above using partisan passions to promote the principles I believe in. In fact, I think anybody who doesn't think that's worth doing is kind of missing the boat, because that's what so much of this comes down to. I say everything is wrestling for a reason. But I'm not going to diminish the principle because it doesn't fall into the partisan passions. Joe Biden's speech today, and look, he's Joe Biden. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. Who would vote for Joe Biden from a libertarian perspective? But my thinking would be he's a creature of Washington, and whatever the Pentagon says and the generals around him, you just go out there and say that, right? That's where Trump got into trouble. I think Trump's gut instincts were good in anti-war, or at least anti-dumb wars or endless wars, but he would let those people get in his ear. If it was Rand Paul or maybe like Tucker Carlson in his ear, he'd be okay or better, or make a good decision like he did by not bombing Iran at the last second. But Biden, you expect he's just going to do what the Washington establishment wants. What he said up there today about America's role and purpose sounded closer to Ron Paul or Rand Paul, or even some of what Trump has said. Or even, anti-war figures on the left like Dennis Kucinich and people like that, or hell, Noam Chomsky, if you want to go that far. It sounded closer to that than what you would expect Joe Biden to say. Certainly what you would expect Hillary Clinton to say, or John McCain, or William Kristol, or any of these people. I got to give props. I'm not going to be like, yeah, I agree with 90% of that speech, but I still hate you and you're wrong. No, because that's just me being a partisan douchebag. And that's not what it's about. My main issue, for my entire being involved in politics, writing about it, thinking about it, is being an anti-war conservative, libertarian. And I'm not saying that was like Abby Hoffman at Woodstock preaching against Vietnam, but just the basic precepts of when we're supposed to go, or why we're supposed to fight, where you're supposed to commit troops, sounded like pretty much what most of the people listening to you today believe.
Yeah. It was, of course we want to scrutinize Joe Biden for everything he does because, he sucks. But it was a good speech, and it was good that they're pulling out. It was almost too good. Like, I almost wanted to be like, okay, what's the angle here? You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, maybe we shouldn't. It almost like my natural contrarian wanted to be like, okay, maybe there's a reason why we're pulling out of Afghanistan and it's not good. Like, it almost got me for a minute. I just am sad that Mike Gravel wasn't here to see it. I mean, honestly.
For real. Absolutely. What a character he was. Look, people, the people who really loathe Trump, they would get mad when I would say, he just told one of my biggest moments. I'm from South Carolina. I know from the accent it's hard to tell that. But he was on a debate stage during the 2016 campaign in South Carolina, Bush country. And that's where he got the wildest about Bush lied. There were no WMDs. Those guys belong in jail. Whatever he was saying, but it was pretty radical stuff. I was loving it. And, some of the political operatives in the state on TV were like, well, that guy's done. He said that in Bush country. He kicked ass and carried South Carolina just fine. Rhetoric matters. When I was on talk radio before Ron Paul ran, I quit calling myself a conservative because people associated me with Dick Cheney.
Oof.
No, that's not what I am. I started calling myself a conservative again, even though that's what I was throughout, when Ron Paul ran for president. He made it safe to do that.
Sure.
I'm like, he's a conservative Republican. That's what I believe. I'm that too. Because those labels matter to people. You mentioned earlier, Joshua, how many libertarians are like, well, I'm a minarchist, I'm a ANCAP, I'm a blah, blah, blah. And that matters to them. Like, that's important to them that they get the term right. Well, that's true of Republicans or Democrats. That's their identity, right? That's what guides so many people. So the rhetoric is important. If Trump has an imperfect record on foreign policy, but you need a base that pushes for the kind of foreign policy you want, a figure as popular as him saying the things that should be said in the direction you want matters. Joe Biden today, look, I don't know about y'all social media, but I've got friends back home who are lifelong Democrats, and they kind of know I work in politics, and they'll argue with you sometimes. I was having an argument last night, a guy I'd known for 25 years, card-carrying Democrat, whatever. Well, we have to stay there to protect the women and girls and women's rights and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm for, women being protected, being secure, but we can't send our soldiers around the world for humanitarian missions. That's not the purpose of the military. And that's what they would have said during the Bush era. Because remember, Bush made it flowery. We're bringing democracy to these people. And look what Saddam did to them. I remember Sean Hannity arguing with Ron Paul. He had torture rooms and rape rooms. Yeah, he had all that stuff. Is it our job as the U.S. military to go around the world fixing that? It's not. Well, you had Democrats until just today when Joe Biden gave a speech and basically was making the argument I did to this dude. That's not what we do. You see what I'm saying? So that rhetoric today from him matters in trying to convince people in different quarters or squadrons. Same with Trump and the right and what we've done. Same with Rand Paul. Same with Ron Paul. The whole thing. Nice.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good thing. Libertarians. It's going to be hard for libertarians to do the right thing here and agree with the speech.
Dunkin' Donuts is not an official sponsor. I was just thirsty.
Did you say Dunkin' Donuts? Is it Dunkin' Donuts?
It's not an official sponsor. I was just wanted to be clear.
It's an official sponsor of my fiance, that's for sure. She loves her Dunkin' Donuts, man. It's like her favorite. So thank you, John Howe, great lawyer from New York. Check him out. He's going to run for some office there. He threw $2 super chat. Said, Jack Hunter is a good guy. A friend told me. Really? Pretty cool.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Rich Clark, $2 super chat. Thanks. He said, today was a great day for outing neocons. You're damn right it was. It was good.
Damn right.
It was good.
Absolutely.
It was good.
High five.
Yeah.
Wherever you are.
Yeah. Listen. Meghan McCain and Liz Cheney are both really upset today. So.
Oh yeah. Like, did you see her stupid tweet about my dad would be so upset about? Of course he would. He was a neocon. That's what you people believe.
Yeah.
But he'd also be wrong. It's funny when I worked for Senator Paul. So, like, there's this narrative about McCain in the Trump era, like he was the cool-headed sage and Trump was the wild man, right? McCain had the worst temper. Obama used it in 2008 to run on, that he'd be a hothead. But, like, you remember how McCain would insult Senator Paul and basically say he's a traitor and league with Putin and all this? Basically call him a traitor. I mean, what's worse than that to say on the Senate floor? McCain would apologize to Rand and then, like, 2 weeks later do the same thing. So, like, he sucks. Like, God bless his service. I just don't want to speak ill of the dead, but this holding him up as some paragon of virtue or something, or somebody we should look towards, is just a myth.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Meghan McCain or Liz Cheney. One of them dropped on Twitter today, "I feel sick," and it's like, oh well, that's unfortunate. But we're
cool.
Yeah, heaven forbid we don't keep fighting wars forever in Afghanistan. I mean, I started a trend today on Twitter trying to get people to get the Afghanistan papers trending, because I think it's a really good time for people to realize that,
Nancy Mace tweeted that out and was trying to get people to remember that. Yeah, 2014, I think that was.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it's like, look, it's been 20 years since that war started, right? Or longer than 20 years. That war is old enough to drink now, and the documents that prove clearly they lied us into that war, into a war they knew we couldn't win, are declassified because it's been so long. So all these people that are like, we can't leave Afghanistan, can go and Google the Afghanistan papers right now and see that we never had any business being there. Our government knew we couldn't win the war, and we're just wasting resources and human lives.
And why aren't reporters talking about that? That's the Washington Post did that story. It's not even a conservative outlet or something like that. Their job, Glenn Greenwald's great on this, and I see some of my left friends get so mad because, I guess to them he's joined the other side or whatever, because this is all wrestling. That's what people care about most. But he's absolutely right that your basic mainstream journalists see their job is to protect the Biden administration and don't let this Hunter Biden story out. This stupid nothing story with Senator Paul and his wife and the stock. And everybody's just like, oh, look, they're just, trying to get rich. It's nothing like that. They actually didn't make any money, and like the deadline had passed before you could sign. But none of the reporters do that. Why? Because it's their job to go after people like him and people like us and get us kicked off YouTube and Twitter. And it's his job to protect Joe Biden and not want to talk about his son and not bring up the Afghanistan papers that the Washington Post did 7 years ago that gives us perfect context for what's happening right now, because they're not reporters, they're propagandists.
Sure. Yeah, I agree 100% with Michael Malice when he says, or who was it Trump that initially said it? The corporate news media is the enemy of the public.
Enemy of the people.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people got upset about that. I didn't, because look, they heard we shouldn't have a free press that criticizes me. What he was saying is we should have a press that tells the truth, even if sometimes they criticize me, but tell the truth about other things too, even if they don't like those narratives. The job of the average journalist today, especially the higher up you go, is to create narratives that are conducive to the politics they like. Sure. That's not journalism, but that's what they do.
Did you like Trump because he was involved with the WWE at one point?
He did shave Vince McMahon's head. Look, I've always said if he wasn't president, Trump would be my favorite wrestler, because I like loud and outlandish and stupid and goofy. And he's a cartoon character. Some of the things I have an emotional reaction to Bush Cheney. So I have, BDS, Bush Derangement, etc. Sure. You can't say anything nice about them without me just flipping out inside. They've done so much, the worst president of my lifetime. They've done so much damage. But by the time we got to Trump, there were some things I liked, things I didn't like. I mentioned immigration earlier, but this emotional, visceral reaction that people who love him or really hated him had, I just didn't share that. So while I had to observe it and be aware of it because of what I do for a living, it was almost like a scientist watching lab rats or something. Okay, they're mad, really mad. They're mad, but I didn't have that, so I couldn't share it. And I have all my friends. I've always kept that personal and political separate. But it was almost like something was wrong with me that I weren't as outraged as they were or loving it as much as they were. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't. He said something funny that I thought was stupid, and I'm laughing at it, but I don't think civil discourse and democracy is over because he said something stupid.
Well, I'll tell you, Twitter got a lot less fun without Donald Trump. Yeah. That's for sure.
all those cable news outlets are so sad he's gone. He says that. Greenwald's right about this too. All their ratings went up. They fearmonger. They fear. That's another damn thing. Let's get into this. People talking populism's bad. Populism's bad. Let's watch CNN. They know what's going on. Those people fearmonger and stoke fear and demagogue for ratings, which gives them more money. And to me, that's as bad, if not worse, than some of the so-called populists that we should be criticizing. Sure. So don't give me any of that crap. Anyways, that was my aside. That's what jumped into my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Joey Bradfield, thanks for the $10 super chat, brother. He said he's met Jack many times via YAL and groups like that. Very nice, and still wishes me happy birthday every year on Facebook. What does he think about the last 8 years of the movement and its future? That's a good question.
I'm an optimist by nature. I think anybody who's paid attention or knows me probably knows that. But it's not optimism just because my personality is optimistic. We talked a little about this at the panel I did with Tom Woods and Michael Maresca at Yale Revolution weekend before last, which was fantastic. Best conference they ever did. I can't wait for next year. But so when I got into this, I mentioned earlier, I quit calling myself a conservative because people associated me with Dick Cheney. I got excited. I knew who Ron Paul was, but I'm like, nobody's going to pay attention to him. And then it exploded. I was glad to be proven wrong. But you didn't have a contingency of libertarian Republicans that could make an impact And now you had one with Amash for a while who left for the Libertarian Party, and he's a great force for liberty. You also obviously have Rand Paul. You have Thomas Massey. I think Peter Meyer, who has followed Amash and is a Republican, doesn't brand himself as a libertarian, but damn if I can find many things I disagree with him on. And he and Amash are friends, and Amash, endorsed and supported him. My friend Nancy Mays, who I've known for 10 years, came out of the Ron Paul movement, a libertarian. We're both from Charleston. I mean, she's already out there making waves on our issues. And, she was the first female to graduate Citadel, has been talking about Afghanistan and whatnot now. So essentially you have 4, 5, 6 people where you used to have one.
Sure.
So that's good, because I'm sort of the opinion that you need, if you have ideas, you need people to embody these ideas. We wouldn't be having a serious conversation about socialism in the United States right now if Bernie Sanders wasn't a thing, or AOC. It had to be a person, if you see what I'm getting at. We need that too. For a while, it was just Ron Paul at the top of the food chain, and now he's retired and is getting all the rest that he certainly deserves. But there will be others. A lot of people look to Rand. I think there are people who might get elected the next cycle. I'm a big fan of Nick Freitas out in Virginia. I don't know what he's deciding to do. I don't know, but I just think he's got all the political talents, and he's a principled libertarian. So that's one part of why I'm optimistic. Let me throw into that too. Young Americans for Liberty, to my knowledge, is still the largest center-right youth organization in the country, larger than college Republicans at this point. Well, they're out there electing state representatives with Operation Win at the Door. And the idea behind that is not only to get liberty people in at the state level. When the movement started, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We're organized at all. When there was an open seat somewhere, whether federal or whatever, we'd be like, where's the local libertarian crazy? We know it's not going to win, but that's what we do, and that's all we know. Well, they're building a bench of people who have some political experience who could actually rise and do things. Nancy Mace in my state, as a state representative, obviously she's in Congress now, her big landmark achievement, and it was a criminal justice reform piece, women in prison when they were giving birth were chained. They were handcuffed to their beds, which is barbaric and terrible. No more. And it was a unanimous vote. All Democrats and Republicans in the state. Nancy led that. So she made that little bit of difference for liberty in my state. Now she's going to do more and other things. And so we have those people already there. Young Americans for Liberty is big and as impactful as it is. I've been to every conference. They're bigger each time, and people I don't know. And that's what you want, because when you do know the people, it's a reunion. It's not a movement.
Right.
Combine that with the actual issues. When I wasn't even calling myself a conservative, you couldn't be like, yeah, we should get the hell out of Afghanistan. Why did we do Iraq? Ron Paul made it easier to start doing that with his movement, of course, with his son and others that I just mentioned have done. Trump put that in a whole different place. So Trump, whether he was trying to or not, and I don't think he was, it's just what he thinks, allowed what we'd already started to build to explode. Now you're just as likely to run into a red meat conservative who's like, I'm America first. We shouldn't be in endless wars, as, well, we got to fight him over there, so we don't have to fight him over here. That's what the Bush lingo was, right? Criminal justice reform itself. Every CPAC now has a criminal justice reform bill. The largest piece of legislation for that was the First Step Act signed by Republican President Donald Trump. That wasn't even an issue for conservatives before. It was for civil libertarians of all stripes, and certainly just plain old libertarians like we are. But now that's just a regular conservative issue. So things like that, I think you have to be of a certain age and remember how bad it was on the right before Ron Paul to appreciate how far we come and how much further we can go using things like Trump and his legacy and the liberty Republicans that are there. And what people are doing in the LP. I don't know, I voted Libertarian Party in the past, but they're doing some good as well. So I think there's more reasons to be optimistic than pessimistic if you're old enough or just at least aware enough to realize how really bad it used to be compared to now.
Sure. Yeah. It's the Bush-Cheney area was absolutely just disturbing for the Republican Party. I think that was the biggest turning point. I mean, that's where we really, really got deep into the neoconservatism. Yeah.
Well, let me give you a personal example. I'm sure many people are familiar with my controversy from 2013 and the Southern Avenger thing. I mean, before I was a Ron Paul libertarian, I was just like a paleo conservative, and there's still a lot of that stuff I agree with. But part of it was like there's zero audience, and there's like 5 of us. It's like nobody's paying attention to you, so maybe I'm going to run around in a Confederate flag luchador mask and say things that I don't believe now, halfway believe then, half shtick, half whatever, but you were just not on anybody's radar. I've seen people do that since, and it blows up in their face, but like, it didn't matter. Nobody was paying attention to you. If you see, people were paying attention to me because I was on a rock radio station and they thought it was crazy. but nobody thinking about politics was, at least at that time. That's the Bush era, the neoconservatives. And I was talking about neoconservatives 80% of the time, even when I was judging, wet T-shirt contests of the nightclub that the radio station was paying me to, hold a microphone at or whatever. So
yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, I had the Southern Avenger that was a pretty crazy thing. I know a lot of people know you from that still, man.
Yeah.
But
and I'm proud of. I'm not the same person anymore. It was Ron Paul that made me not. I believe in the Constitution, limited government. I even believe in secession. If California wants to go, they think the rest of America is terrible, and Gavin Newsom and destroy their economy, whatever. I don't care. But decentralization, I'm a Jeffersonian is probably the best label for me. But I don't. To be a white person in the United States and not think that symbol means something different to black people, and you're going to convince them that it just means decentralization, not slavery and racism, is pretty naive. And I had to grow up a little bit and have different perspectives to get there myself. Yeah. So I don't really talk about all that, but that's what happened.
No, absolutely. No, I get it. I've read up on it a bit, and I think I've heard you speak on it a couple times too. And people's views change. Sure. Especially when it comes to political views and all kinds of different stuff, views on immigration, views on, criminal justice system. Your views change as you get older, and it happens. It definitely happens. I had dumb views. I was a neoconservative, if you can believe that.
That's worse.
Yeah, I know. I was. I joined the military right after. I was 17 when 9/11 happened. Okay.
Right. That probably affected you. I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
That affected you in a way. You're like, well, I love my country. Who's doing? And by the way, thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks.
Anybody who served in Afghanistan, Iraq. All you can do is sign up and do your duty. Our beef as civilians is what the hell is the government doing and why do they put you in harm's way? And we should be holding their feet to the fire on that. True. Those are two separate things. I'm sure you agree with that. You served. I don't need to be telling you.
And war made me not a neocon anymore. That's really what it did for me.
Sounds like you and Peter Meyer, who was Amash's successor, the Republican congressman. He was in Iraq. He was in Iraq. He was also there as a contractor later. And I listened to his interview with my friend Brad Palumbo, which is one of the best interviews with Meyer, who doesn't call himself a liberty Republican, but you tell me where you find any differences as a libertarian. I can't.
True.
But he is vehemently anti-war, based entirely on his experience both as a soldier and a contractor. And before he went into it was not that way. Had the attitude that you mentioned. Now, he was probably older than 17, or maybe not. I don't know. He's younger than me, but you see what I'm getting at. That's what it taught him.
Yeah, well, I woke up. I've told this story a few times. My mom and I didn't get along very well. I was sleeping on the garage floor at a cousin's house, and I woke up to
like cement floor?
Yeah, like a cement floor on a rug.
Oh,
yeah. And I woke up and it wasn't my mom's fault. Trust me. I want to clear that up with everybody. My mom's always in the super chat. She's the biggest supporter I have. She's wonderful, but we didn't get along. And I woke up on this garage floor, and my cousin was like, check this out. And I'm looking at the Twin Towers get hit by these planes and going, wow. I'm like, what movie is this, man? And he's like, this isn't a movie. This is really actually happening right now. And I was like, holy shit. And so I wouldn't join the military because I was like, I'm going to go and protect my country. We've been attacked on our soil now, and within 6 months of joining the military, boot camp, school, and to the fleet, I was in the Persian Gulf, and we were fighting a war in Iraq. And I'm going, what the fuck is going on here? Why are we in Iraq? I was under the impression that it was like Saudi nationals via Pakistan that attacked the world. You know what I mean? And we're at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I'm going, what the fuck is going on here? And so it was a pretty wild thing. It was eye opening for me. I kept hearing about these weapons of mass destruction. I mean, George Bush declared war while I was sitting on the USS Constellation in the middle of the Gulf,
wow.
Persian Gulf. So
it's interesting to hear people's different experiences, especially 9/11. I was already political. I was a Pat Buchanan anti-war conservative.
Sure.
That's what I was. I was in my mid 20s, I guess. And I was working for my father's construction company. We were downtown Charleston, and somebody said, a coworker's like, a plane just hit the Twin Tower. And I was like, that, so the small plane? I didn't even know it was a commercial airliner or anything. And my mind's like, terrorism? I don't know that yet. And then when I heard the second one, I absolutely was like, this is a terrorist attack. The reason I thought that, Pat Buchanan's book, I think it's one of his books. He has so many books. But he laid out a scenario in which Osama bin Laden specifically, this is a hypothetical for him. This was Pat making the blowback argument that Ron Paul made to Rudy Giuliani. Like, when we do things in this part of the world, we can cause blowback. in the Middle East he was talking about. But his hypothetical was Osama bin Laden had 2 nuclear devices explode in a Seattle port. And that's not what happened, but Osama bin Laden did something else on a different coast. And Pat Buchanan predicted that a few years before it actually happened. And he's like, this is the kind of thing that could happen. And that's what Ron basically said, that blowback is a CIA term. And, we're not blaming America. Those people are murderers and need to be dealt with accordingly, which is why we originally went into Afghanistan. But there's nothing wrong with looking for a motive, and there's nothing wrong at looking at your own behavior, what you do in the name of national security, that might be making the nation less secure, which is what it did.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We got some super chats. Bubblegum Gun, man, what's going on? He said, when are we going to admit this war is not for peace, but for the goals of a certain lobby within the U.S. government that would love to control the area? To not talk about this certain group is cowardice. $7 super chats. Thanks, man. I think he's probably talking about the Zionist lobby. I get it.
Yeah, that's so tricky. And people say there's interest. So we know that. But, people like to throw around words that could be misconstrued as anti-Semitic. But on the other hand, people like, you can't talk about this issue or you're just automatically anti-Semitic, which is what the neoconservatives do. I don't think that's fair. But I'm not going to spend the rest of this podcast getting into that hornet's nest. But yeah, what was it? Ron that said it, or somebody's like, there's more. Might have been Rand. I don't know. Probably more. I don't know who said it, but I heard it. There's more honest debate about American foreign policy in the Jerusalem Post than there is in the United States media.
Sure.
So like in Israel, you can talk about these things in a more free way than you can in the United States because of all these bugaboos about who's a racist or anti-Semite, when they're really not, when they're just talking about actual things that are happening with the Palestinians and different things. So
sure. Yeah. And I've had people on my show and myself too criticize, the Zionist apartheid state of Israel. And I'm Israeli. Like my dad's side of the family's from Israel, right? I'm half Israeli. So when people call me anti-Semitic or a Jew hater or whatever, it's always for a good laugh for me, because I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Right. Well, there are nasty people who are that way, and like they're acting like they're having an intellectual conversation, but they really are like racist POSs. So there's that too. It's all a mix, and it gets confused, and it inhibits honest, respectful conversation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things you don't criticize, because if you do, though, you'll get. It's just like criticizing the left and getting called a Nazi. It's the same shit. It's right. They just throw out words that try to shut down, stifle, productive conversation, because they know that you're right.
The most destructive language coming from the 2016 presidential campaign was not from Donald Trump. It was from Hillary Clinton when she denounced the alt-right and was calling out all these alt-right idiots by name who are basically white nationalists. And basically coming out of her mouth, it was making regular Republicans who weren't racist or, be like, well, they must not be so bad because, this is the same people who thought Mitt Romney was a racist in 2012. And, anybody on the right's a racist. They've just been hearing that so long that when some actual white nationalists come along, Richard Spencer, whoever, they're like, the average voter, they hear it come out of Hillary's mouth. She does it, but she didn't care. She's so self-serving. She wouldn't have gave that speech Joe Biden gave today. I guarantee you that. But you see what I'm getting at. That was one of the most damaging things, but the people I guess I'm talking to would say Trump said the most damaging things, but I just don't think that's true.
Well, and let's be clear, there's not a Clinton in the world that would have pulled us out of Afghanistan.
I think Bill more than Hillary. My read on Bill was that he just liked being president and chasing women and hey, Bo, I'm gonna play saxophone on Arsenio Hall. That was his thing, and she's more of the ideologue.
Sure.
I really do. I think she's a neoconservative ideologue and would have stuck to her hawkish guns. And Bill's just glad to be there. I think maybe Biden's like that, and I would prefer that. That's better. Not having an ideological center or any.
Well, I should take it back. George Clinton definitely would have pulled us out of the wars a long time ago.
George Clinton would have done that for sure.
Yeah, he would have funked us right out for sure. We got another $10 super chat from TJ Fitzsimmons. Thanks, man. New member of the show too last week. Scott Horton versus Bill Kristol, October 4th. Gene Epstein needs some props for rescheduling it without Bill dropping out. Scott is going to just smash it. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, Kristol did agree to it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like they rescheduled it for October 4th.
Scott is not only a great guy, but a great debater for our side. Hell yeah, I'm down for that. Yeah. Is it a cave? Is it a regular debate? Or?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be. Gene usually does Oxford debates. at his place in New York there. So that's probably going to be a lot of fun. And I've had Scott on the show twice, and actually for you guys that don't know, he's back on the calendar on September 3rd, but it's going to be a 3-man show with myself, Scott Horton, and also Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment Center. So it's going to be an awesome, crazy show.
Man,
crazy show.
Michael Bolden in a long time.
What's that?
I haven't seen Michael Bolden in a long time.
He's also been on the show once. It's gonna be a fun show, and I'm basically just gonna sit there and let them talk because you can't get a word in edgewise with either one of those guys. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Sure.
But so let's. What do you got coming up next, Jack? We're getting close to the end of this public stream. Then we're gonna hop into the members only stream and talk about wrestling for a little bit. So you guys, if you guys want to come and watch the wrestling talk with Jack Hunter, you guys got to join the channel membership underneath any of my videos. Just join link. It's $6 a month. You get awesome, cool emojis for the chat. You get really cool custom badges, and then you get to watch all the exclusive after hours live and chat in there and ask questions and stuff like that. And there's like 30 after hour streams up on this channel now too. So, but Jack, what do you got coming up, man?
Well, in the immediate sense, I'm debating Tho Bishop of the Mises Institute. If many of your viewers are familiar with him,
he's also been on this show.
Okay, well, there you go. We're debating libertarian populism and what that means, because we both agree that libertarian populism is the way to move forward. We have very different ideas, I think, and we'll find out tomorrow about what that means or should mean or could mean or how far you should go. And we're doing that for Town Circle. If you look up Town Circle on Twitter, I'm sure they'll have the links. If you follow me on social media, I'm tweeting about it and I think it will air tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Oh, cool.
And that's to raise money for people in need, for the hungry, for the homeless. It's to raise. We've raised, I think, close to $500 so far, and hope to raise some more. I have my YouTube channel. I started doing YouTubes again. That's how I started all of this crazy Jack Hunter stuff that I ended up doing, and I just like doing them. But it's brand new. If you want to find that and subscribe, you can read me in the Washington Examiner. I've been contributing at Liberty Tree, different places that I write, and I'd love to see if you give me a follow.
Yeah, absolutely, Jack, man. I really appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your voice, and you're awesome, man. If you could just stick around for like 2 or 3 minutes while I close out the stream, sure. We'll start the members only stream, and we'll get into that heavy wrestling conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks, brother. All right, guys, another awesome episode of Break the Cycle. Jack is just the nicest, coolest guy, man. Definitely go give him a follow, Jack Hunter 74 on Twitter, and check out all the cool stuff he's got coming up, man. You guys are going to enjoy that. He's been around a long time. He's seen it all. He's fun to hang out with. And if you guys want to come and watch our wrestling stream, then join the channel membership or become a patron or subscribe star at Break the Cycle JS for both of those things. And you can get it uploaded tomorrow, but you also get into the private Discord server where you get the cheap new Top Lobster gear, all that great stuff, man. It's a pretty cool deal. If you get one of the lower paying, like the $6 on the YouTube or the $5 on the Patreon or subscribe star, and you're buying Top Lobster gear as it comes out, you're actually not paying anything to be a member of the patron. So definitely check it out if you get an opportunity. Guys, coming up on the show tomorrow, I'm stoked. I'm going to have Patriot Jay on the show. I'm really excited about this. Guy's super awesome. Grifty Award winner from Hoteps. It's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, on Wednesday, Eric Jackman does one of the best Trump impersonations you've ever heard. He's a professional funny man, awesome guy. I'm really excited to have him on. He's on Reed Coverdale show, Four Horsemen all the time. On Thursday, we're going to have Shane Hazel from Radical Podcast on. Shane is also running for governor of Georgia. We're going to hash some stuff out and hang out for a while. We always have a good conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then on Friday, Jared from Hoppien.org will be on the show to absolutely destroy all the Lulberts. It's going to be a lot of fun, guys. Definitely stick around. Definitely hit that subscribe button if you're checking this out, just because it's free and it helps the algorithm. Thumbs up the video. I'll see you guys on tomorrow for Tuesday's show with Patriot Jay. But until then, don't forget to break the cycle.
Have to explain the lyrics of my last song may seem to contain a violent call to action in the verse and refrain, but I just landed in Minecraft. The helicopter part was in reference to GTA 5 and the things you do. So any violence you commit, I am not an excuse, because I just landed in Minecraft. A chipper is my friend and he's constantly cold. Accusations of incitement getting totally old. Make your own choices, yeah, you have control, because I just landed in Minecraft. All the you see, I would never advocate force unless there's due process and a trial, of course. And if you're convicted, we will make you a corpse. In Minecraft, just in Minecraft. Nothing on me and you know it. No product dinners, cause it closed for COVID. Holy shit, I think I